Welcome to the Diesel Podcast presented by DFC Diesel. Kendall, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today. I appreciate your time and talking about trucks with me. I follow you on social media and I saw some really nice 7.3 Powerstrokes that you have, and our audience loves 7.3s, loves the content about it, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you today. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'd love to start with like the trucks themselves. You have a couple of them, or maybe even more than two. What drew you into diesel? Like, if you think, way back when, what really piqued your interest in them?
I don't, if we're really being honest here, like just the way, because it's always obviously been a good many years since that first peak interest and kind of where my life went out. I think a lot of it, is crazy as is, I think God kind of put diesels in my life for kind of a very specific layout of kind of the way the rest of my life kind of played out. Because my interest really didn't make sense as far as I didn't grow up in motorsports. I didn't grow up around. I was an only child. I didn't have friends that were in motorsports. I didn't have anything. Now I did grow up showing horses, so I was around trucks. As far as a using, kind of going down the road thing. But I rode in my first modified truck probably when I was about 17, 16, 17, around there. And it was a single cab, dually, 12 valve, fully built at the time. Like I said, it's probably 500 horsepower at the time, but that was a lot. And I fell in love with torque at the time. Why I picked the slowest platform out of all of them, I don't really know. I don't regret it, because aside from going to a fully mechanical platform, they're really easy to work on. They're safe for the most part. The blocks can handle, your upgrades and your stupid things that you do when you're young. You're throwing too much at adding a motor. And at the time, you had 6 liters coming out and people were just blowing them up left and right, and because they were kind of trying to do the same thing with a different heating system. So I think at this point I stuck with 7.3s. I've had some 6.7s. I have a 6 liter. But I guess it's more of a nostalgia thing. And then you have people, you have David Beach going out there, and you have Brian Jellick going out there. And, Brian, he's been in 7.3s, as long as I have. And you're starting to see people really pull some real power out of these.
Yeah.
And that's been cool to watch, watch the progression of these slow turtles, people be able to really come forward and do some cool stuff with them. So I think I stuck with the 7.3 a lot for just, it is a very familiar platform for me. If something goes wrong, I pretty much know exactly what it is. So and as far as my trucks now, I have an '01 Platinum. I guess I got it about a year and a half ago. I was searching for probably 2 years for it. It's always been my favorite 7.3 ever since I saw them for the first time. But finding one, I am in Texas, so there are more of them down here, but most of them are really ragged out. It's really hard to find one that is in good shape, that just doesn't have a ton of miles. And I really, really lucked out with the one that I got. It came from a show truck guy. It was impeccably cared for. Before him, an old man owned it. His wife got it for him for their anniversary, brand new from the dealership, and didn't even have a ball on it. Like he just drove it around, and it was just his little pack around truck. And then I picked it. I found it and bought it, and it's been fun. It's been nice to. It's been a cool. I haven't done a lot with it. Don't want to call it a project, because it literally is. I haven't done more than just basic, upgrades as far as efficiency, intake, and just things like that. And then my other truck, my single cab 7.3 that Truck Source Diesel built. That was kind of a funny story how I ended up with that truck, because it was built before I bought it. I can't take any credit for that, other than gutting pretty much everything out of it that was in it. We didn't really do a whole lot with it. but I had a 6.7 dually, and this was at the height of crazy market prices for trucks, and I had a guy just total my vehicle. Like I got in a wreck, and he rear-ended me because his tires were bald, and totaled the truck. And I didn't really need a dually anymore at the time. I really didn't need a truck at the time, to be honest with you. But they paid me stupid money for my dually, and I was like, well, I could afford like to buy a SUV, and I can also afford to buy something else. And so I started toying around on Marketplace, and this single cab was posted, and I knew I knew Truck Source Diesel. I've known them growing up, and I knew that they did a good job on the truck, even though the build was a little bit older. And I was like, well, I know at least I know the history of it. Reached out to them, got a little bit of the history on the truck, and then bought a truck that I absolutely didn't need. But it was nice because it was kind of my trip back into the diesel world, and I got to reconnect with a lot of my old friends, and then the 6 liter project that I haven't even started. That's not even worth talking about. To be honest with you, I can run faster than anybody can push it right now. So
what's really cool it gets me really excited because I think our interests in diesels were about the same time and for a lot of the same reasons. Like I wasn't around motorsports. I didn't have anyone in my family who was a mechanic or was in the auto industry at all. It was really something I kind of had a interest from childhood, like RC cars, and I would see trucks, and it was kind of cool. But as I became an adult, it gave me something I could attach to, like, and I could put effort into, and I would read. I would get magazines. I'd go on forums, which we talked about a bit before the podcast. Like I would go on there and I could learn stuff, and then YouTube was rising, and I could watch videos. And for me, it became, such a central part of my life that it is my career, and I've made a lot of great friends over the years. Some of them they don't even live near me, but I've kept in touch with them.
Most of mine don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say 99% of mine don't even live in the state of Texas.
What I'd like to spend some time talking about that because it's really powerful, and it's why a lot of people listen to this podcast or subscribe to a YouTube channel or buy a truck. It's so important to people. What was it like as you got into them and connecting with people and maybe going to events and seeing things? What was that like in building your passion for diesel trucks and 7.3 specifically?
The forums I think it's hard to explain forums to people that didn't grow up in that era, of forums. And I tell people is like the first forum I was ever on was, and most people probably are not even going to remember, is Turbo Diesel Register.
I remember it.
Yeah, like that was a really old one. And I was on there. Wasn't very active. I did a lot of reading and things that I think I was on Turbo Diesel Register before I ever even had a truck. And then I moved to Powerstroke Nation, and I think Powerstroke Nation was the big hub for, where I met most of my friends. And like I said, I was a little bit on Competition Diesel, not super active on there. I think maybe in the entirety I was on there, maybe made like 2,000 comments or on there. And that, I know that sounds like a lot, but it wasn't a lot, compared to the other forums that we were on. And then Powerstroke Nation sold. And then we ended up with Powerstroke Army. And I think that forum is actually still open. Some people I think are kind of keeping it alive. But it's kind of hard to explain this thing where you kind of got to know people based on, most of the time we didn't even know their faces. We'd know their trucks, we'd know their screen names. There are still people to this day that get called by their screen names, they get that's kind of their label, is their screen names. And even my, kind of what I go off of my Instagram and my TikTok, they're all the same as they were all our screen names when we were on forums. And explaining to people that we met each other on this like back and what was essentially like a Facebook post. That's kind of how it was set up. And we'd all go across the country. Looking back on it, the first time I flew out to TS, I didn't even drive, I don't think. I think I flew out to TS and then somebody who I'd never met before picked me up at the airport. And like, we're piled on, 10 deep in a hotel room. And, again, most of us had never met and you kind of just, you're kind of like family. And it's a weird dynamic to explain to people that have never really, especially when I tell the story because, I'm a girl doing it. They're like, oh, you went all the way across the country with a bunch of guys you didn't know. And I was like, well, I mean, when you put it that way, it seems a little weird, but like, it wasn't weird at the time. And, I never had one problem ever. I don't think I've probably ever been safer in my life to be honest. But, and then you kind of just develop these lifelong friends. And at this point, I don't even know that you call them friends. They're pretty much family at this point. But, and then there'll be people that we don't talk to a lot. We've moved on and families and stuff like that. And we'll catch up every now and then. And, it's like we never stopped. It's traveling to diesel events. And I tell people this because they'll ask about things like shides and, your rowdy events. And I think from our perspective, because we kind of came from the racing side, that's where a lot of our focus was. And so we went to these events and, I hate to say it, I don't think we really hung out with a lot of the normies, at these events. We kind of went around with people that actually raced and sled pulled and, and did dynos and things of that nature. So we I would never say that we missed all the shenanigans by any means. But we definitely were there for the racing and the camaraderie and the partying was a byproduct of that rather than I think it's the primary focus for some people. So yeah, and it's also been really cool to watch a lot of the guys that I grew up with and friends, they've gone and they've built these massive companies. And, I knew a lot of those guys when they were working out of their garages and they didn't have much of anything. And most of them, a good many of them have built massive businesses that have been very, very successful. And that's been really, really cool to watch. You kind of watch these guys and we just know, half of them, we'd show up to a race and someone would blow a transmission out and we're all climbing around trying to get everything fixed for the next day, and that's been cool to watch. It's cool to watch people that deserve to be successful, be very successful. And I think that our industry is a big testament to that. There are some bad apples. And I watch a lot of it from a distance now. But when I hear people getting, bad business publicity, someone will come out and, a whole bunch of people will say that this person was bad. They're never people that I started with. They're never people that are familiar names with to me. So it's kind of, the OG people seem to turn around and make very, very reputable businesses. And because I knew who they were as people, I'm not surprised at that at all, that they got what they deserve out of their effort in the industry.
Hey, Diesel fans, we want to give a shout out to our friends over at Kershaw Knives. They have a 20% off code. So if you add some knives to your cart, add code 20 TDP 2026, you get 20% off of MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear if you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house. They've got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different handle designs, different opening mechanisms, and their whole lineup's designed to meet any budget that you might have. So if you're in the market, head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com, use code 20 TDP 2026 and get 20% off your cart. I went down memory lane when you were going through forum names and you mentioned Competition Diesel. I was a lurker on there and I lurked for the epic beatdowns that used to be on there. Like, it was entertainment to me, to see it. And I've had a couple. I had Tim Turner on a few times on the podcast from CompD, and
I know Tim.
Talking with him about that and just the community that was there. And that's where it started for me. And it's transitioned, greatly to social media and have like YouTube videos and podcasts, like I've seen that interest just shift. I think it's still there and it's still passionate. It's just where we find it is a little bit different. Um, with events and stuff like that, like those are because I didn't grow up around motorsports and there wasn't a huge diesel truck culture where I had to go east to find it. And when I did, like I went to Shy Diesel a couple times, it was almost like it's like everything I had felt, everything I had read, the pride I had in my truck, how much I loved it, how I like to detail it and order parts for it. It's like I was just immediately surrounded by 100,000 people who were just the same, and it was like I felt home because of the
Yeah.
people
It's like
that
a
were
bunch of
there.
excited kids, at
Yeah,
every age. And you get that even now, you get around those people and you get trucks involved. And it's like everybody's like they're 15 years old again. And they're excited about their trucks. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine a few weeks ago. He called me and we were talking about Powerstroke Nation. And we used to have this ranking on Powerstroke Nation, which was the fastest diesel list. And it was just this list of the fat, and it wasn't by engine, it wasn't by 7.3s or 6.4s, or it was just straight up the fastest Powerstroke list. And it was heated, like and it was this constantly changing list of who had the fastest diesel. And we were all really good friends. All those people in that top list, they're all really good friends. And you think of some of the people that were in that list. Like one of them is a good friend of mine, and he runs No Limit, and he was on there with his freak 6.4 at the time. And just most of those people ended up staying in the industry and working. But I'm known for being an internet troll, even to this day. And I think the only ones that I haven't pissed off are just the people that I grew up on forums with. Cause like I think, once you get to that, because it's cutthroat. There was no, I think I got, Mikey that ran Powerstroke Nation. I think he used to mute me just because I got irritating to him from time to time, And but it was a wild, wild west on those forums. And but it was never personal. You could sit there and you can run your mouth back and forth on the forums, and you could make fun of somebody's entire family, their dog, and then you'd show up at an event and you guys were fine. There was never any like actual legitimate beef. And I think people don't realize that, so then you kind of banter and you kind of give that pressure back on some of the Facebook groups that are going on now that are big. They're big Facebook groups. They're big communities for that. But you can always tell the people that grew up on the forums, because they poke a lot of fun, and the other people just don't know how to handle it, which is kind of what we're going for. I think we try to kind of pick at people and get under their skin. Um and it's fun. I don't think I think some people don't realize that it's fun for a lot of us to push buttons at people.
where do you think the tight knit community aspect comes from? Does it come from? And I've really been curious about this. I've been trying to nail it down myself. I think the closest I could come up with on my own was that when you choose a diesel truck, you're part of a. It's not the most common type of engine. It's a lot of times you have one. You might be the only person on your block that has one, or the only person you come in contact with. And so when you meet somebody else who has one, it's like you have this instant connection. Is it because it's a smaller group and so you like bond
No, I
together?
don't. Since that is really my only, I don't really have anything to compare it to. I would imagine that it's probably the same in other, niche type motorsports. I just don't think we have a perspective of it. I think maybe because I'm not in it. But you kind of see like the old guys at the gas station with their Corvettes, like they kind of seem to have that same camaraderie. I just don't think it's ours. So um I don't really know, because the one thing about the diesel world is, well, at least specifically the performance side, is it seems to attract a very consistent type of person. Um, so, I think that has a lot to do with it. But again, I don't know if it's the same if you move into other, classic Mustangs or, I have no idea. That's like so out of my wheelhouse there. So, I don't really know. Like I said, I think that there is a specific dynamic aspect that's different when you're because of the forums, because we interacted and we talked every single day. Like that was where we went. We weren't texting on our phones as much. We weren't going to Facebook. Yeah, those things were around. But when we got off work, instead of people jumping on and playing a lot of video games and stuff like that, I'm not saying that that wasn't going on at the time, but you didn't have live games, where that's where people go to kind of have that social aspect of, video games with the live aspect. They get that kind of camaraderie and social interaction. That was just not the reality at the time. And so that's where we went for our social interaction. So if it wasn't in person and live, then we were getting on the forums and talking to our friends. And we every one of those had a chat room, and there'd be 40, 50, 60 people in this chat room. Is complete chaos. And so that was kind of, our camaraderie. And so there was always this big buildup, a big event was coming up. And, we're talking about it for months, oh, it's coming up. We're all excited. We have all these plans that we're doing. And then, you'd go and we'd have this great time. And then we're talking about the event for the next 2 months, until the next one hits. And so, there was so much of, and, most of us were, all in our, early 20s, mid 20s. And we spent our good portion of our 20s doing this and making those connections. And I think that particular dynamic is probably why in the industry that that generation of diesel enthusiasts are so close, because you do see it too, like myself, like in the scheme of important diesel people. I'm not special. I don't have some pro mod truck. I don't have some big pulling truck. It's not like I've done a lot of stuff in the diesel industry. And a lot of the people that I know also didn't. But they're the same. We can sit down and you talk about, a lot of our friends are pro mod guys and big guys now, and they don't get treated any differently. Like they're all a part of the same family. It was always about trucks. It was never about who had the best truck or who had the fastest truck or who had this. That didn't put you on some kind of ranking of how you're looked at and you're liked in the industry. We got super excited when our friends did good. And you can see it too. You go on YouTube and you look up, some of the more prolific racers of the time, and you'll find 10 videos, terrible videos, because they're all taken on, can't like actual, terrible video cameras. And you'll have 15 videos of the same truck, and in the in the description, it's like, oh, whoever is racing at the time. And there was just that really positive of, like, that's my friend. And and you can kind of see the interaction in the YouTube comments of sometimes, they wouldn't even say it was someone else's truck, because at the time the industry was so small. So you didn't have to say, this is so-and-so's truck. And then you'd see a few years later when some of these trucks were still around, and they'd be like, why are you stealing somebody's video of their truck? And they're like, I'm not stealing anything. It's, you just weren't really a part of that group. And I always liked that, as everybody was treated so, and at the time I didn't know any better. So it wasn't like, I knew it at the time. You just, now looking back on it and kind of seeing, watching the show truck industry from the outside has been interesting. With the blow up of TikTok and Instagram, and watching the vast differences of the show truck world. And there's this constant pissing contest with the show truck world. And, you see these big events that they really try to put on, a lot of them put on some really good events. and try really hard. And I don't even know that these guys like each other, you know, like with the way they talk, and they kind of constantly have this beef. And there's a difference between, you know, there's a little bit of competition between people where there's the shit talking between people to kind of lead up to a race where you kind of have that tension. And you still see it. It's competitiveness. You're going to see it in racing. You're going to see it across the board where you're going to have that shit talking. You're going to have that poking back and forth. Um, because there's a lot of money on the line and there's a lot of money into it and effort. But at the end of the day, those guys, if either one of them saw each other broken down on the side of the road, or they needed a part, even though they, you know, they had a part and they needed a part, they'd step up and they would do it, and they'll shake hands at the end of the day. And, you know, when it comes to, especially, you know, where you're trying to find a motorsport, and I think motorsports, as far as like drag racing in general, sled pulling, which sled pulling is specifically diesel, but drag racing isn't. I think that's why it's such a good family atmosphere, is because it's good for, you know, kids to see, you know, this fierce competition of so much money on the line and so much, you know, clout chasing on the line. And at the end of the day, 99% of them are going to shake hands at the end and, you know, be excited, and everyone will, you know, be upset that you lost or that, but it can be anybody's game. You know, some people are going to break, some people are going to hold it together. And sometimes that's just the difference between winning and losing, is just who holds it together and doesn't break that day. And I think that's cool. I think that's a good lesson for people to learn in it. And but as far as the girls, and I don't know what it is like now. You know, I had told you about the young lady that I would have on. I think she, you know, super great. But you know, girls coming into our industry, you know, that want to learn to wrench, that want to learn to build their own. Unless it's changed, and I just don't see that it's changed, don't expect to get any slack cut. You're gonna get it later on. You do. Like, I wouldn't say I get a lot more help for dumb stuff, and most of the time, if a guy's gonna call another guy and ask him that, they're gonna be like, you need to just get on YouTube. They're a lot more patient with me than I think they are with other guys. But at the beginning, boy, they're gonna see if you can cut it, and they're gonna rag you hard, and they're gonna make sure you want to be there. So if somebody wants to be, you know, on the performance side, if they want to be taken legitimately from, you know, a woman going into it, you better have thick skin, and you better not be expecting any kind of, you know, treatment of taking it easy. They're gonna be hard on you, as they should be. I understand why.
There's a lot of women that are really pushing the racing side and driving these vehicles. And I think what's really cool about it is I feel like the community at large is judging the performance, not the gender. Ideally, that's what they do, and that's what's so refreshing to see, is if you can perform, if you know this vehicle inside and out, and you're good at what you do, that's what's important. And I think bringing or getting younger people interested in it it's going to be the future. Like we've talked about how you and I sort of got interested and got into the community. Somebody now is going to get involved in a completely different way. They might not even go to events. They might be so far away they don't go, but they can go onto Instagram and follow someone or tag them in what they're doing, or, you know, YouTube. So online, there's tons of ways to connect, but then it's taking that next step, and how do you become physically involved in it? Going to your first sled pull, your first drag race, your first event, going up to that booth where maybe you are nervous to go say hi to the Fire Punk guys or somebody at Suncoast or somebody at one of these well-known brands, but you do it, and then it starts to kind of build momentum. And, you know, it's like, I think back to my first truck, it was stock for about 8 months. And then it was one part, and then it was another, and then it was another. And then at the end of a couple of years, it was almost not even really daily drivable anymore. Yeah. And I'm like, how did I end up here? Do I really want this? You know, I kind of do, but I kind of don't. Like when it snows, it's not fun. So I think that's been really refreshing to see, is the women that are performing in diesel are doing it at the highest level and they're being judged based on what they do.
Yeah, and I think that's why part of the reason why I love the industry so much is because it is that. And kind of what I was telling you is, you know, they don't hold you, you know, they hold you to the standard. If they can do it, you can do it. And you know, like I had said before we started this, they have more faith a lot of times in my ability, you know, than I have in my own ability. And sometimes I'll come out and I'll say something that is 100% out of my ability range. And I'll be asking, you know, for sources or something, or like, well, why don't you just do it? And I'm like, because I literally, like, this is not, you know, it'll be like a trans swap. You know, like I can't do that. Oh, sure you can. Like, and I'm like, no, I can't. Like, but it just never crosses their mind to think that my ability is less than theirs. And I do love that about the community is, you know, it takes a while to get there. You know, your friends at first. Guys in general just kind of have that you know, I'll do it for you kind of thing, which I don't have a problem with. Like I understand where it comes from. And so you kind of have to intercept that when you kind of move into that space and be like, hey, I don't want you to do it for me. Show me how to do it. And you know, a perfect example is I just recently got into welding. And I couldn't do it the normal way. Like I went out and bought classic two because I can just get one. So I get two classic machines, way more than I need. And there, the community there is similar to motorsports, as they do a lot of modifications and upgrades. And so, of course, I'm just going to completely gut this thing and upgrade it. And I was talking to a friend of mine who is in the diesel world, and I was like, I don't remember what I was asking him. We were talking about something else. And he was asking me about how the build was going. And I said, I need to take the starter and the alternator in to get rebuilt because finding them online has been a little bit tricky because they don't have the YouTube videos and stuff like that. So, like, unless you're a part of the community and know, you have no idea what's going on. So I was like, I need to take this starter and this alternator in to get rebuilt. And he's like, well, why don't you just do it yourself? And I was like, because I don't know how to do any of that. And he's like, no. He's like, it's fine. I'll show you how to do it. You can do it. You don't need to take it and you can do it. And so, you know, what has taken was probably could have been a 3-week process where I could have these machines up and running. You know, now I've sidebarred to I'm sandblasting everything myself. So they sucker me into stuff that I really never wanted to get into the first place. I was perfectly satisfied with going and paying somebody else to do it. But now they're like, no, you can totally do this. Just do this. And so, you know, I'm in the middle of pulling these starter and this alternator apart, and I get half of the part, and I'm like, you know, I never really wanted to do this to begin with. Like I would have paid somebody else to do this, but now I'm too far into it, and I'm like, well, I might as well learn how to do it at this point if. And so, you know, I really appreciate that mentality of, no, you know, you can do that, and that's how they treat, you know, guys treat each other. And you just don't get any of that slack once you kind of get to a point. I've always really appreciated it as, you know, being able to sit down and learn things and have the patience to teach you. And, you know, that's been really cool, but I've learned so much stuff that I don't think I ever really had intention of learning in the first place. Cause again, I'm not afraid to pay somebody else to do stuff, but if I can't do it, you know, I'll complain about it, and then I'll have 5 people over here, you know, that we all get together and do it and have fun. So it's just a cool community. And I've always liked the fact that I wouldn't, like I kind of said, is I wouldn't say that I get the exact same experiences as a guy does as far as patients. You know, I get a lot of more patients, and they're a little nicer to me, I think. Maybe not. Some of them are not nicer to me. Some of them are twice as mean. But when it comes to competition, it doesn't matter. You know, you want to, and I love that. Like, cause like I had said, there were no women in it when I was in it. There were some enthusiasts, as far as like they went to the events and they worked some of the events and stuff like that, but it wasn't like they were out building their own stuff. They weren't going down the track. They weren't doing things. Most of them weren't doing a lot of wrenching on their own trucks. Not taking it away from them. There a lot of them are, I still know and stuff like that. And I like them as people. There's nothing. There's space for everybody in the industry. You don't have to be, some wrencher woman to have a space in the industry. I think that's important to say. It doesn't devalue them. They can enjoy the community without having to be into it. But I will say that it's exciting for me to see some of these young girls and these girls come through and do so well, and being able to talk the talk and talk about their builds and stuff like that, because that just wasn't a thing, when I was growing up. And so seeing some of these girls, come and do stuff and just do really well is really cool for me to watch. And especially in an era where you're seeing, on the gasoline side, and you're seeing in the truck show side of such a push of women thinking that they need to use their body, and they need to use this to promote their to kind of get where they need to get to, and kind of do that. And I guess I don't care. I don't it doesn't bother me that is their choice. And if that's the route they choose to go, that's none of my business. I just don't want these younger girls coming into this thinking that that's what they have to do, because the performance side of the industry is about respect. And if men don't respect you as a person, you're going to have a very, very different trip in this, because I saw the difference in the way that they treated and they respected certain women in the industry. And I just don't want the younger generation coming up thinking that they have to do that in order to make the next step. If other people decide that that's the trip they want to go, women, then so be it. That's that's their deal. But I hate it for some of these young girls and people thinking that that's what they have to do. And so you see that, young, what's her name? I forget her name. I'm terrible with names. But watching her, she's cute as a bug, and she's just, you talk about her build and she's just spitting all this stuff out. And she comes from a really good family, and, really prolific family. But your family can't force you to learn that stuff. Your family can put you behind a car and tell you how to do something, but they're not putting her behind that kind of horsepower that most of us couldn't even dream of piloting. Like, you put me in there, I'm putting that thing in the wall easy, and this girl just wrecks it down it just is just awesome to see. And that's where I hope some of these young girls and will watch people like that coming up in the industry and idolize that over thinking that they have to compromise their morals in order to kind of make it. Because I she's proof, and she's done way more than I have. But I'm proof that you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that to be in the community. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to have $100,000 into your build. Just like you did, you can do it part by part. And learn by there. You can just do little stuff. And that was always my biggest advice I can give anybody, not just women, but young people who didn't come from, nobody taught me how to be mechanical. Nobody taught me any of that stuff. Just try. Don't be afraid to try. Like, don't be intimidated by learning how to use tools. Don't be intimidated by learning to learn new stuff. Just try it. Because the first time is the only time that it's scary. It's kind of like I was telling you on my first injector job, that was really intimidating. But after the first time I did it, I think I had to pull it back apart. Cause I think I upgraded injectors, 6 months later, and it was no big deal. I've ripped everything back apart and it was no big deal. And, now I don't know what torque specs are, so I'm glad it held together, because I just kind of, we need a prayer there. But I mean, it's a 7.3. If it doesn't work out, it'll probably be fine either way. So
Hey, diesel fans, I wanted to chat with you about diesel fuel. It's something we've talked about a lot on the podcast, and specifically ways that it can lead to a lot of costly repairs. And the main reason that we have these issues is a lack of lubricity. Our friends over at Hotshot Secrets have developed a formula that boosts performance and then addresses this issue. So whether you have an old truck, new one, something anywhere in between, we all face this issue. Hotshot's EDT is a 6-in-1 formula. It cleans injectors, boosts cetane, and it has 4 times the lubricity as their leading competitor. So it's a great way to be able to stay ahead of the maintenance curve, avoid those costly repairs, and the best part is it does the work for you. So all you do is add it to your regular fuel up schedule, and it's doing all the heavy lifting. So you don't have to worry about some of those issues that just come with diesel fuel anytime we buy it from the pump. If you go to hotshotsecret.com, use code DIESELPOD20. It'll get you 20% off your order. We really appreciate the team and our friends over at Hotshot Secret offering this discount code just for you guys. So if you're in the market, head on over to their website, use code DIESELPOD20, and get 20% off your order. Common question we get from you guys a lot is, hey, I need a diesel engine. I either, I can't wait this long to get one, or normal place I get stuff from it just takes too long, or they don't have the parts in it that I need. Maybe my truck's not stock, or I tow heavy with it. I don't want to go back with just a stock engine. DFC Diesel is a sponsor of the podcast. We worked with them, hand in hand on doing episodes, answering technical questions. They have a complete lineup of Cummins, Duramax, and Powerstroke remanufactured engines that are set to a standard of ISO 9001 2015 standards, which is a huge deal in the aftermarket. And there's certain levels of quality testing, validation that are required for that. So when you get one of those engines, the type of quality that's built behind it with an industry-leading warranty that's really comprehensive. And the other thing with that is, sometimes the options that are out there, it's a basic OEM engine. You want a little bit more. You don't want to have the same failure again. So there's a bunch of different series of engines that they have, from core, street, tow haul, and also the Speed of Air series, which we've covered on the podcast before. There's a lot of really cool benefits to it. And if you have questions about that, reach out to them. If you don't know the type of engine that you're looking for, if you go to dfcdiesel.com, there's a ton of info there. You can send an email or you can reach out to them. Also, they're working with Speed of Air pistons, which it's the only piston that pays for itself. And there's a lot of really cool technology behind it. So you can add that into your build and be able to get better fuel economy, increase power, increase torque, and better engine life out of it. Some of the most common engine applications or series of engines that they have with that lead time, a lot of them are in stock or they have really short lead times. So you can check your favorite retailer or go to dfcdiesel.com, check them out, see what's in stock, see what you can get. If you have questions, maybe you want to do something that's outside of the normal series of engines, they have tons of choices for rods, cranks, pistons, valve train upgrades, tons of different things. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over and check them out. Those are really good points you made. Really, really excellent points, because like social media is big right now, right? And that when you browse it, it puts a facade up where you think you have to either have a certain build, you have to have a certain amount of money to do it, you have to have a certain
1,200 horsepower.
Yeah, you need to have crazy power numbers, or you have to look a certain way, or you have to have a certain set of skills, or you can't attain it. And it's probably one of the most frustrating parts for me watching it is not everyone. I don't want to just do like a broad stroke of the whole community or the whole social media aspect of diesels. But that's really not the foundation of it. It's what you described as far as the passion and then the experience and knowing you're going to fail, but then learning through it and then building connections with people is vastly more important than that picture that gets 1,000 likes or 5,000 likes or 400 comments. But that's what I think a younger person sees, and they go, well, I need to get 5,000 likes and 500 comments and a whole bunch of reshares. That's how I need to do it because that's how that person did it. But they don't see and hear how it's actually done.
And it's not real. It's not real either. And that's kind of what I watched a little bit on the show truck side of it, is because you see these kids that are 22, 23 years old putting any level lifts on their trucks and all this stuff. And I'm like, there's no way you can afford that. You're upside down on that because you think that you have to keep up with the Joneses. Don't get me wrong, the trucks are beautiful. But but you see that toxic mentality in the comment section of people that just have now 10 8, not even 10 years ago, before any level jumped on the scene, it was like bags, like, oh my god, you have, now it's like, peasant, you have bags, like, and I watch that all from the outside. I'm like, and then you move it over to the performance truck side, and this has kind of always been a thing, is greatly overestimating horsepower. You see these guys get on there and they're like, oh, I got 1100 horsepower, I got 1000 horsepower, and they've never had the truck on a dyno. And they're saying, you have to have 1000 horsepower in order to kind of do anything. And I'm like, and my truck as it sits, if I had the appropriate injectors and turbo on it for the level of built it is otherwise, I'd be sitting over, just, between probably around 720 theoretically is kind of where it was dynoing before the first engine blew up. But it's so light, like that amount, people are like, oh, it's just seven, like it's a two-wheel drive truck, like anything more than that, I'm gonna have trouble, which is a whole thing that I have to address before I can even put it on the track, is I'm not going to be able to hook at that. And you're like, oh, it's 700, but it's a very light truck. And so, these see these kids with their 6.7s, and the 6.7 has been amazing is because it's such a powerhouse, easy horsepower platform. But you see it and you're like, that truck is not 1000 horsepower, because you see what's and like most of the tuners, I know the tuners that are coming from them, and I'm like, you've never put that thing on a dyno, you can't come out and say it. But and TikTok is really bad about that. They're saying they've never put the trucks on a track, they've never put the trucks on a dyno, and they're going around and telling the entire world that these are between 1000 and 1200 1300 horsepower regular street trucks. And they're and because the problem is they have no concept of horsepower, and so they feel a fast truck because they are fast, especially for what they are. But I don't think people understand what 1000+ horsepower feels like. Just like you said, is you built your truck part by part, and then by the time you got to the end of it, it's not fun. It's fun in a certain aspect, but you can't drive it. You can't drive it in the snow. You can't drive it in the rain. And people don't understand that it's not, you get to a certain level of horsepower, and if you're driving that truck around everywhere and you're not, it's never getting squirrely on you, you're not 1000 horsepower plus. And you don't want to be. And I don't think they realize that. And I've been lucky enough to be able to drive, people's trucks that are much more than mine. And they're tricky. It's not, you can't just jump in them and cruise down and drive them the way I drive, my stock 7.3. If I drive it like that, we're definitely going to end up facing the wrong direction, and so like it kind of goes into what you said, is it gives these people, well, I don't have that much money, I don't have the money to draw, $4,000 on turbo or this and that, so I'm just never going to do it, I'm never going to try. And in my first dually, it was stock at the beginning, and I think I did intake and exhaust, I straight piped it, and just little by little, just stupid stuff, your trans cooler and replacing little stuff like that, and then injectors, and it was still a big slow truck by the end. But it didn't affect my place. Nobody cared if I had a fast truck. People still don't care that I have a fast truck or I don't have a fast truck. They're not fast. But I hate that people have this false this false idea that they have to be, that they have to have anything. They can show up to these events and have a completely stock truck. And people will talk to them. I know Levon at Fire Punk, he's going to talk to those guys. If some kid walks up to him and want to talk, he's going to talk to him. All those guys are crazy friendly, or they're very, very welcoming people. And you never want people to feel like that they have to have, you know, $15,000-$20,000 to get started. They can literally go on eBay, and you know, that's how most of us did it. We picked up parts. I still do, you know, I still do it. And sometimes people make fun of me, and that's fine. I don't care. So
Those are some of my most fun episodes to do, is talking with a racer who isn't like, it's not a big company vehicle that they're using and sinking hundreds of thousands of dollars into. It's somebody who put it together themselves or with the help of friends, and they go out there and perform. And I think where it all kind of comes back to the enthusiast side is with motorsports itself, is like we see those numbers. 1,000 horsepower daily driver was a huge thing for a long time, and now that number is even higher. But I think as I've gotten older, I've realized, like, on the way our roads are designed and the way stoplights are and merging and everything else, like, there is a limit to what you can drive on the street comfortably. And then if you factor in weather and then reliability and maybe cold starts if you live in a colder temperature, it changes what your idea of performance is. It's one of the most common questions I get is, what's a good power number for, you know, my 5.9 or my 6.7? And it's tough to answer because I found it like 850-ish. That was too much for where I live in the city that I'm in and the weather that I deal with. That was too much power for what I was doing. So I think being able to set realistic goals and maybe not necessarily chase that 2,000 horsepower or 2,500 or 1,500 or whatever it might be because we see it, that's great for that application. But doing it within like your budget and your ability has so much power and satisfaction that you can get from those builds. So I think we're on the same page with how we view that.
yeah, and that can be different for different people. Like you need to drive not what your buddy thinks is great. You need to drive what you enjoy driving, you know? And you know, I live in Texas. I live in Central Texas, you know, outside of Houston. You know, I got my taste is street racing in Houston, and grew up kind of in the middle of the height of street racing in Houston. So I spent a lot of time watching that, allegedly. Um and and you know, back when tuning, especially for 7.3s, and kind of coming up to where you had this battle of the six position or the five position chips, tuning, right? And there's only so much you can do tuning wise, differences between relatively stock platforms. Is that was the biggest tell of, because at the end of the day, they were roughly all finishing out at the same horsepower. Everything else was just the difference of, you know, how early fuel is going to come on, throttle control, stuff like that. And you know, this argument of people, you know, this tuner, you know, I like this tuner, I like this tuner, I like this tuner. And all it was a difference in the feel of what they liked. And I mean, obviously some of them had a little catastrophic issues because of the way they were lined up. Um, but like you said, but I think a lot of people lack perspective, because I think that there's a lack of self-awareness on how much horsepower they actually have, you know, because they're not dynoing these trucks. And so they are running around on 700, 800 horsepower. And really, 700 to 800 horsepower on a pretty heavy truck is going to be rowdy, but it's doable. At least where I live, it's doable. It's flat country out here, mostly wide open highways. If I go to Houston or something like that, like that's going to be kind of a pain in the ass. But between 700 and 800 horsepower on a truck that heavy, it's going to feel a lot different than a single cab, you know. And you know, they just don't know. They don't know what they don't know is they want to have this pissing contest online on this horsepower, you know, this horsepower game. And they just don't know. And that did exist back. That's been around forever. The difference is there were so many less people in the industry at that time. Like, it's humongous now. But at the time you could only say that so many times. And someone's like, put your truck on a dyno, put your truck on a dyno. You know, I have a friend now who he ran a Smarty on his 5.9 Cummins. and he would get drunk and tell everybody that his truck had 850 horsepower. All it had was exhaust intake and the tune. And he would tell everybody this. And we were kids. Now he's grown, and I still make fun of him for it. Because now he knows more. He's built vehicles and stuff now. He's smart. And I was like, oh, you know what I mean? Like that 800 horsepower truck you had with just a Smarty. And I don't see as much, and it might not be because I'm in that side, as we used to have a lot more dynos. Like we would have dyno days, small dyno days. We had them, 4 or 5 a year here in Texas. Even at the time where it wasn't huge. And I don't know if they're just not doing those as much, or maybe I just don't hear about them. But more people need to put their trucks on some dynos if they're going to go around saying that they have over 1,000 horsepower, because I think it would have some perspective on what they're doing. And then they need to go ride in one of these 1,000 horsepower trucks and realize that it's not as easy as they think that it is. It's not as enjoyable. I would say 1,000 is not, you don't have a lot of talent to drive it, but you have quite a bit of talent to enjoy it, I think.
Yeah. You jogged a memory of mine, which was like local dyno days, and I lived in Southern California at the time. And one of my friends was like, "Hey, this local Ford dealer's doing a dyno day," and we went up there, and it was, I mean, looking back on it, it was actually really cool. Like there were a bunch of 6 liters. The 6.4 was just coming out, and they had one there, and this guy rolled in with this like lifted maroon 7.3. And it was like smoky, and it pulled towards the back, and it made a ton of noise. And at the time, I didn't know who it was, but I learned later it was Mike from No Limit Fab and his 7.3 Powerstroke.
So that's who I was talking about, Mikey.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if you're from California, if you knew Mikey. I got lots of stories about Mikey.
I didn't know him then. I've kept up with him over the years since. But like that.
Have you had him on?
He hasn't been on the podcast, no. Not
you
yet.
need to get him on.
Yeah, I got to bug him. But that was just so cool as someone kind of new into the diesel space, was to see people, and I still remember their faces, what they talked about, what they liked about their 6 liters, what they liked about the 6.4, and then later on going to other ones, is that local aspect to it really kind of fueled a fire of myself with love of trucks, and then expanding it out. So I think what you mentioned is so key to being able to do that. And I think for someone listening, if they're younger, they want to get into this, maybe they got their first truck, so much of what you said is so helpful to them to navigate, whether it's just a passion or a hobby, or like we talked about, expanding it out and maybe doing it professionally, maybe racing. If women are listening and they want to get into it,
getting your sportsman. The thing is, like, a lot of people push me into this because of the people that I grew up with. I don't want to get on the track until I have something fast. And that's a little bit of a toxic mentality. And every single one of the guys that help me, most of the people that I'm involved with on the racing side are around the pro mod people. So these are people who do, but they have come up, and every single one of them are like, just do sportsman, just get out there and learn to do sportsman. Like, and I'm not taking the advice that I've been given, but I'm going to pass it on is, even if your truck is not fast, even if it's just barely stopped, nobody cares. Just go enter your sportsman's class. It's good for the industry. It pays entry fees. It keeps these events alive. And it just gets you on the track. It teaches you, how to stage, how to get past it, and the nerves that you get performing in front of people.
Yeah.
I've competed my whole life, so I know what that's like. But don't be afraid. Go to these events. Enter your sportsman's class. Just go and have fun. If they knew how many people who are the fastest trucks in the industry now are building the fastest trucks that started out just petering down the track. I remember at one race, a friend of ours, there was a race that used to be out in Louisiana, and we got like 6 people in a slightly modified, TDI. We packed into this car and this is not legal. We probably shouldn't have been doing it, kind of, but you just got to get out there and do it. Don't be afraid to look stupid, because the only people that are going to think you look stupid are the people that don't matter.
It was really cool to chat with you today. I appreciate your time and talking about so many really important aspects of the community. For somebody that's listening, if they want to follow you on social media, they want to see this truck, maybe ask you some questions about 7.3s or different things like that. Is there a way that people can connect with you, like on TikTok or any other platforms?
Honestly, I don't push a lot of traffic through because my Instagram and my TikTok they're just pretty much bullshit accounts that I have fun with. So I don't like to push out traffic through those accounts. If people want to find me, they'll be able to find me. But pretty much unless someone wants to sponsor my build, I just want to exist. Come see if you see me at an event and you want to come say hi. I'm gonna try to hit things like UCC and Rudy's next year and go to a couple of events next year that I'm looking forward to. But if you see me and you reach out, you can obviously reach out on social media, but people will find me if they need to find me. But I don't want to push that's not my style. I don't like that kind of attention. So
Well, it was really cool to chat with you today, Kendall. I appreciate the time and look forward to seeing your truck. It's up and ready. You're going to make it race worthy. Definitely, I'll check it out. So
yeah, it might be 10 years from now, but I'll get it there eventually.
don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 20TDP2026 to get 20% off your cart. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear if you're in the market for a new EDC knife, something for hunting, fishing, around the job site, or around the house. They've got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different handle designs, different opening mechanisms, and their whole lineup's designed to meet any budget that you might have. So again, if you're in the market, head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com and use code 20TDP2026 for 20% off your shopping cart. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Robert, TSW Diesel, Brian, John, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube and podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 9 of the Diesel Podcast and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2025. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.